just we just need more time for work. That's all we need. Okay.
I'm just
That's if
worried
we
about
could.
you traveling too much, man.
I mean the traveling is the break. I mean
I
if I'm
gotcha.
here, I've got to like there's so much shit to and like the carousel of fucking Zoom calls, bro. Oh my god. It's just back to back with the fucking calls that could have been emails. I love it. It's great. I love it.
Listen to this guy. First world problems with his fancy job.
I just
Good
I just
morning,
want to be on
everyone.
binge.
Good morning,
What's
everyone.
it?
We have reached episode 53 of the Three Body Problem here with
We live?
Juanito.
Are we live? Are we live? We live already?
We've been live, bro.
This
Been live for
motherfucker
5
cannot
minutes.
be trusted with this button.
What?
Hello,
Yeah.
Costin. How are you?
I'm a bit busy, guys. Just still recovering from this cursed kidney stone thingy that I don't wish on anyone, including enemies or whatever.
Super painful.
But it's super terrible. Nah.
Sorry,
We
man.
are going to get through an episode here. It's been a relatively slow week from a news perspective. It was Patch Tuesday. We didn't get any 0 days, exploited 0 days from Microsoft. We got 160 plus CVEs, but no O days. We didn't get anything from Ivanti or Fortinet this week. Feeling a little left out and disappointed. But we can kick
Is
off
someone
the
just
show.
not looking? Is that
Maybe it's all backed up for the next big release.
people are on vacation? That's what it is. 4th of
I wanna
July.
start
No
the
one
show
had
with
time
this.
to report shit.
I want to start the show with this news out of the Department of Justice that 2 Chinese nationals were indicted for working alongside Chinese Ministry of State to hack US and computer systems in 2020 and 2021. This thing is related to COVID. But more importantly, and more from a newsworthy standpoint, one of the guys was actually arrested in Italy, and the FBI celebrating this arrest in Italy and awaiting extradition here.
Bruh.
And the FBI made a note of like dunking and saying this is the first time they've done an arrest. He is one of the first hackers linked to Chinese intelligence services to be captured by the FBI. So there's a lot
Bruh.
happening there. We talked in the past on this podcast about like why do we worry about these indictments and these pictures on a most wanted website, because nothing ever happens. We're starting to see something new happening here. Juanito, how do you read this? All the news around this HAFNIUM operator arrest.
I mean, super surprising, super interesting. Definitely, like, I mean, I don't think the FBI is bullshitting on this. Like, it's definitely precedent setting. I don't know if it's the right, like, I don't know how we feel about the precedent, but I don't want
We
to.
talked about this before.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to sour on this. Like, I think it's actually pretty fucking cool. Even the indictment is quite revelatory about a group that has been particularly difficult to keep track of, right? Like everybody thinks about HAFNIUM 2021, right? And it's this big landmark thing about the use of these ProxyLogon vulns. Which how they got those vulns is still an interesting, weird, discussion. But the more complex thing is Hafnium was essentially a new threat cluster that Microsoft announces with these vulnerabilities, and then the vuln becomes available to so many other folks that the original activity drowns in a sea of like ransomware operators and like other shitty APTs, and like essentially like they just flooded the zone in a way that meant that we lost sight of Hafnium itself, and we were thinking more about a sort of like broad campaign, but it was just a fucking free-for-all. So in reality, like there really wasn't that much of a public awareness of what Hafnium in particular was. And to me, I think I even mentioned them like last episode, right? Like to me, when you want to talk about like top tier Chinese threat clusters right now, obviously you talk about your Salt Typhoon, and you talk about a group like Hafnium, but it's mostly out of this notion of like mysteriousness. Like they're playing into blind spots. We don't really know what they are, who they are. But I always wondered if that was also us seeing the MSS proper. Because keep in mind that most of the time when we're talking about these different groups out of China, you've got these like independent contractors And then you have a lot of like PLA affiliated stuff, and then some MSS. Like MSS is kind of like in the background, and you don't hear about them as much. But I've always wondered if like the greater set of tradecraft is going to come out of MSS rather than PLA. And I mean, this is an interesting peek behind the curtain, at least.
Costin, can you back up a little bit and give us a little bit of background on who HAFNIUM is or who HAFNIUM was?
Yeah, this was one of the interesting names that I remember. It kind of just appeared out there together with these 4 days that they were supposedly exploiting. Nowadays, I guess the Microsoft name for it is Silk Typhoon. So just to put it a bit connected to the reality we have nowadays. Correct. Yeah.
The new marketing landscape.
Going back to the COVID days, if you remember, there was like the race for the vaccine, and there were multiple threat actors that were trying to get the vaccine. For instance, another one we discussed just before the show was Wellmass, that was later associated with APT29 and Russia. But there were other actors targeting university, targeting research centers. Some of them were targeting Canada, for instance. We were all like trying to track these activities, but I guess the one that really made HAFNIUM famous was this exchange vulnerability or chain of vulnerabilities, 4 of them, that have a very mysterious origin. I think that even nowadays we don't know for sure what happened there. And if you remember the story, around the same time, same vulnerability was reported by a Taiwanese researcher called Orange Tsai. That I met him last year in Taiwan, and he is like constantly participating in a lot of conferences. He's a good guy, like for sure. How just, let's say, how does it happen that HAFNIUM got their hands on the same vulnerabilities at the same time is a kind of a mystery. Some people speculated, I guess, that they stole them from Microsoft after they got reported to Microsoft. Other people speculated they were stolen from the origin, but somehow I kind of doubt that.
The idea that Orange Tsai himself could be compromised isn't far-fetched, though, right? I mean, this guy's a very publicly known exploit writer. Juanito, I see you kind of like your bat ears are up, and I bring it to you because you've mentioned this specific issue on this podcast, at least in my memory, at least 10 times, this Orange Tsai connection. How did the Chinese get their hands on this thing? What is your hypothesis?
I don't know. I think I really don't know what happened. It just seemed to me like one of those egregious mysteries that
could it just be a coincidence?
No, I don't think it was just a coincidence. And if like this, it's been years, but if I remember correctly, like the implementation was like the same as what Orange Tsai had. So it's not a case of parallel discovery. It's very much a case of they got this shit from somewhere. They got it during the patch. If I remember correctly, they got it during the patch cycle, right? So like in that time when Microsoft already had it, but they were working on a fix. Sorry, my cat's very fascinated by the camera. So there's this concern about, right? Like how do they get their hands on it, right? And that think about what you just said. Or
they had their hands on it already and they knew it was coming. It was being patched at that point.
And maybe that means they were using it earlier. But the point, I think the real point stands, right? If they had access to something on the Microsoft side, that is extremely telling and extremely concerning. If they had access on the Orange Tsai side, that should also be fairly, I mean, it's at least very interesting and fairly concerning, considering that Orange Tsai is like not just some bullshit like exploit dev, right? Like this dude's like coming up with amazing exploits and super active in the scene. And I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot to assume that being in Taiwan and being a well-known exploit developer, you are attracting a different level of attention.
He's traveling to Black Hat. He's traveling to conferences. I mean, the idea that he's not a target is crazy.
Well, it's not just that he's not a target. It's also that you're in like a prime collection, like a prime collection area for the Chinese for which there is next to no friction, right? Like if they were running those sorts of ops in the West, like you can talk about there being some potential consideration about what that entails, but doing it in Taiwan is like a fucking given, right? Like no one's going to bat an eye. I also wonder, considering that it's not like they came out with a trove of Orange Tsai exploits or some other set of stuff, if this is just part and parcel of whatever it took to report the vulnerability to Microsoft, right? Like you send some emails, your manager's involved, their mailbox is in the middle of it, there's Microsoft people in the middle of it. I don't know when it goes into like VIA, right? Like there's a lot of different questions about where, like at that point, you're in a very porous sort of
VIA
set
is
of
this
what could
Virus
be happening.
Information Alliance, this information
Yeah.
sharing thing between AV partners, right? Yeah.
And
Yeah.
remember, they kicked a number of Chinese companies out of VIA in the past
was
simply
MAP.
because of this kind of suspicions. Oh,
Are
yeah,
you
MAP,
are you
correct.
conflating
Sorry,
MAP?
and I'm conflicting
You
the
meant
two.
MAP,
It should
right?
be MAP.
Oh, you
I
mean
meant
MAP.
MAP.
Actually,
Yeah.
you mean MAP,
Microsoft
not VIA.
Active Protections Program, which is the pre-patch
Thank
dump
you,
that
yes.
gets sent out to security vendors, network defenders, and so on. In the past, we've had several instances of Microsoft kicking out Chinese for sometimes just like leakage on websites. You can see some code pasted on websites, but then they never really explain why. But in some cases, it could be related to things like this, is the argument you're
Right.
making.
Right. I mean, they're super touchy about it, and like AV companies, they're very careful about who gets access even internally, right? Because you just don't want to leave yourself up to being open in that way. But yeah, I'm not saying that it was through MAP. I'm saying that it got out somehow. And the reason I've brought it up 10,000 times in the past 4 years is, well, what the fuck happened, right? Like, how are we so cool with, something this critical? And it's not even like I have to inflate the possible damage. Hafnium was an example of like the worst possible kind of proliferation and abuse at a global scale, which Microsoft did not handle well at all. So how do we just kind of like take it in stride, right? Like even from the perspective of making the argument that people should report these things to Microsoft because Microsoft is the responsible player that is going to ensure a good outcome and blah blah. Like, are they, right? Like, look, we're 4 years down the line. The issue with MSRC is much more systemic than whether the stuff is leaking, right? Like they're having a whole host of other problems. But it just seemed like a bizarre, shitty pass to give everybody involved, not to like give some kind of accounting of what they think happened.
Costin, the arrest in Italy, does that stand out to you as something significant, or this is kind of like par for the course after indictment? You travel, usually you get put on an Interpol notice somewhere, and somewhere you get picked up. Do you think this was more like a targeted thing? I bring it up because, as the FBI said, this is the first time a cyber espionage actor has been arrested and waiting for, what's the word?
Look, we know that situation is quite different between military and civilian. So for instance, military, you almost never see them traveling anywhere. Actually, I know people like on the defense side of things, right? People who are working for defense organizations who are simply just, let's say, not allowed to travel somewhere without getting some kind of a blessing that it is safe to go there. I met such people previously at conferences and even invited them to other conferences, and they said it's unlikely that they will get the blessing to go there because it's too dangerous or too risky. Unfortunately, that's a situation not just for criminals, but also for defenders. Now here, my understanding is these are not military, so they are like civilians working for private companies, working with the MSS or receiving instructions from the MSS side of things, so from the intelligence. And probably they assume it would be safe to travel. Maybe they even got the blessing. Yeah, it's safe to go there or something like that. Now, in terms of the indictment, I admit that I haven't checked the exact date when they were indicted, so when that happened. So I was thinking if this is not actually that they knew this guy was traveling to Italy, they had him like on the radar for some time and they just rushed this indictment quickly and with Interpol and everything so they can actually grab him in Italy. While, let's say, at the moment that he was traveling there was no problem. But the moment that he arrived there, like it just overnight, there's the indictment, there's the arrest warrant, and the FBI travels there to get him.
The Costin was made according to the court documents. Officers of the Ministry of State Security, which is the MSS, Shanghai State Security Bureau, directed these civilians, private sector guys, to conduct this hacking. And they connected those two. When conducting the computer intrusion, Tsai worked for a company named Shanghai PowerRock Network Company. PowerRock was one of many enabling companies in the PRC that conducted hacking for the PRC government. And one of the things that stood out here was the indictment describing an SSSB officer directing him to break into US-based universities, immunologists, virologists. It's part of the thing Costin mentioned about like spying on each other's COVID-19 vaccine advancements or whatever the scientific advancement. And they describe a case where the FSB officer directed him to go after those universities, and then he came back and says, yes, I'm in the box. And the guy says, okay, go get this stuff out of the box and acquire the contents of that box. And he followed up. So they were probably just, in detail tracking all of this. The arrest does surprise me because I feel like reciprocity is something that we should all be talking about and nervous about. Having someone picked up somewhere, traveling to Thailand for a nice vacation and getting picked up some American researcher who's just in some being blamed for this. Is that something that crosses your mind at all?
So let me put a finer point on that without skipping your question, right? Like I think that's a valid question in and of itself. But let's put a really fine point here as we talk about this landmark situation, because I think the Chinese have opened themselves up to this by virtue of this shell company arrangement that they seem to keep relying on, right? Like, we didn't arrest a PLA officer, a military officer. We didn't arrest an MSS officer or somebody with a formal card that says I am an intelligence officer of China, please if found please return to, right? You're arresting civilians who have collaborated essentially for profit to if you look at the charges, I need to kind of comb through them, but they're all kind of the run-of-the-mill charges you throw at somebody doing hacking against US entities, right? So in a way, when we talk about reciprocity, the question becomes, to what extent are we open to that, considering the strictures around authorities in the US? I mean, in that sense, right, maybe all of this insane bullshit around, well, somebody with a military uniform has to be the one to click the button. Somebody with Title 10, Title 40, Title 9, whatever, has to be the person that actually executes the attack. And we're looking at it going, guys, this is ridiculous, right? Nobody else does this. However, is that stricture what protects Americans running ops against China, let's say, from being legitimate arrest targets, as opposed to just being civilians working in alignment with whatever, who can be taken in for having broken the law, right? I'm not saying that's going to matter at all, right? At the end of the day, if the Chinese want to retaliate and they just want to find a way to make lives harder, the same way the Russians would just go and pick up some random asshole, some journalist or whatever, and just throw him in jail. NBA player, throw them in jail. There's nothing keeping the Chinese from finding other ways to problematize things. But I think if you wanted to be really strict about legal, diplomatic okayness, I think the issue here is that they're using civilians.
Fascinating.
Whether let's remember also the cases of some Western researchers who were in China just to meet with hackers, like do their own investigations. And I do recall two cases which are interesting in my opinion. One of them is the Chinese police actually came for them and said, like, you guys have 8 hours to leave the country. That's it. If you aren't out of China in 8 hours, you're going straight to jail. And they rushed and they took the first flight out of China, if I recall correctly. And the other one is as someone was trying to leave China with a bunch of laptops. People there said, okay, how many laptops? 3 laptops. Well, one of them stays here, and as a courtesy to you, you choose which one stays here. And he was like, oh shit, if I say like, yeah, I'm gonna take this one and this one stays here, are they gonna take the other ones?
Right.
In the end, I think they were right to the word. So the one that he said it stays to China, that one stayed in China. But
Wow.
there were happenings in the past with China, but I think they were more on like this kind of a nuisance which happens in the spy circles. Like you find people messing with the lights in your room, or pretending to fix the heating, that the heating has no issue, or replacing a fuse but the light works fine, or fixing the Wi-Fi but the Wi-Fi is not even in your room. So yeah, it's
These all
probably
sound like
along
very
these lines.
personal stories.
To
right?
me, maybe not. I don't
I
know.
remember some of these from the great days,
I-
not
I
even to
remember-
us in particular, right?
I remember asking you one a question like, how do you know so many things? And I remember your answer back then was, I have a great imagination. So I'm gonna say the same. I have a great imagination.
I must have been drunk. I
Yeah.
don't know.
There's a connected story here about the Chinese cyber ecosystem. A new report out of Winona December Burnson from the Atlantic Council. Just a point I wanted to note there. In one of the key findings, she makes the point that China's domestic cyber pipeline dwarfs that of the United States. It's also increasingly moving to recruit from the Middle East and East Asia. We're hearing about this new power rock now. We've talked in the past about Isoon and Pangu and possible connections. Do you think this is like just the early stages of what will be a drip of these kinds of stories, kinds of pickups of civilians, private sector guys who are now getting caught up into malicious hacking activities?
I don't know. I mean, I think Winona's paper has a really interesting point in and of itself, right? Like giving it its proper due. What Winona is rightly pointing out is that, like, when we say that Chinese supply chain for O-days, for exploits, and a variety of things around that dwarfs the United States, like, we mean dwarfs. Like, it is just pound for pound. Like, this is not a
Really?
situation, dude.
Are
Like,
you guys not over exaggerating this? I remember you saying on this podcast, China is kicking our ass, and this is why,
Yeah.
like China,
no,
like
I mean,
China
China's
Con
kicking
was
our
like-
ass. China's definitely kicking our ass. And we saw it with sort of the Salt Typhoon, whatever side of things. But I think this is a really fine and specific point, which is when it comes to exploits. If we're going to talk about exploits, China, I'm going to make up a number, is fucking probably 200 to 1 on like exploit devs, right? Like the number of talented Chinese exploit developers in the field doing the work, looking at whatever targets, is a multiplier, an order of magnitude greater than the number of those folks in the US, and possibly in the US and the EU, like in the Western world. And look, it shouldn't surprise us. In the US, we have 2-3 universities that produce people who actually come out with the level of skill required to play in the exploit dev space. I'm going to SummerCon now, like traveling today. I know at SummerCon, I will probably see a not insignificant concentration of the exploit developers in the United States. Right? Like, and yes, there's greater numbers hiding in the IC, and there's greater numbers amidst the contractors that sell to USG. But I think in its totality, that space is just not at all comparable to what the Chinese have got going. And I think we're generally used to being dwarfed in scale, in human power scale, by places that don't have high end knowledge workers, like not high end knowledge capability. So we can look at India and say, yeah, they can 100 to 1 us on like physical labor, but they don't have people who can do weird machine thingies like exploits, right? In that sense, we'll always outnumber them. And with China, that's just not the case. So I think the point that she's making is actually really important, which is if that's our reality and we can just accept that as our reality, then if we think that exploits are an absolute necessity for supremacy in cyberspace, which is something we could debate, then either we get really creative and aggressive in how we're going to have this like pipeline of like capability generation, higher throughput of capability generation for cyber ops, or we can just admit defeat at this point and get fucked. Because like what are we saying, right? Like we're not birthing exploit devs at the right scale. We may, I don't, hopefully we have a dynamic enough market almost entirely being fed by government dollars to keep that generation capability or throughput or whatever going. Or hell, like hopefully our Five Eyes alliance means that we're also tapping into the exploit devs of Australia and the UK and whatever, and that maybe creates a more a better supply pipeline. But I don't know. If we're not, then I think what Winona's rightly pointing out is like we're in huge fucking trouble.
I don't know. Costin, a lot of this reads a little alarmist to me, and put into context everything Juanito just said with the fact that whenever we run into a Western APT or an APT connected to a North American APT, it's always the most advanced. It's always ahead of the curve. Is it because of these Five Eye alliances and relying on exploit devs coming out of Israel and our friends? Or do you think like this is a lot of alarmism about how far behind the US is?
Look, there's probably two things here. One is that this kind of standoff between the US and China is quite asymmetric, in my opinion. On one hand, US has a formidable power, has all the big tech on their side, like the capabilities are mind-blowing. It's not just budget, but again, it's all about like who uses technology. And I mean, things like Google, YouTube, whatever you want. They're basically used all over the world, and the ability to leverage the knowledge of these technologies and understanding how they operate and where the data is stored. And again, FISA and all sorts of like legal surveillance techniques and so on, they give the US a formidable advantage. What is different, I think, is the rate of innovation. And probably on the long term, that matters more. Who has the ability to innovate faster, to be more agile, and who's the challenger and who's the leader? And here I think that probably China is doing a bit better in the sense that they appear to be more flexible, more agile, and developing at faster rates nowadays. For sure, they're still behind, way behind the US in technology.
They also have a lot
like
more people than anyone else, just by raw numbers.
I think, that's part of the explanation why their acceleration, if you want, is higher. And also the fact that because they don't have all these many different advantages and big tech and however you want to call it, and control over sea cables and fiber optics and satellites and so on, they need to be strong in other sectors. To be honest, I'm still waiting to see those big 0 days from China, like the iPhone 0 days, 0 click. There, we know such things must exist. We know that, right?
I mean, haven't we seen them, right?
We've seen them at Pontoons, and we've seen them shown off and displayed.
But then the Uyghur campaign, right? Like that, the whole reporting from Patrick Howell O'Neill about the Pontoon vuln being essentially the same thing that was being used against Uyghurs, and that the
But not
campaign
enough.
that Google,
water
yeah,
holes
for
and
sure, not
things like
enough.
that. Not
Yeah.
not at the level of sophistication that we see from
The Israelis, for instance.
private
Yeah.
sector actors, right?
Yeah.
PSPs. And we don't see the zero click 0 days against WhatsApp, iPhones that we see from other sides. And I think they must exist. Maybe they just don't want to burn them and save them for more valuable things. I don't know. But with this, again, with this acceleration that and this speed that China has at the moment, I worry about the balance of powers in 5 to 10 years, unless, of course, something major happens. Because in the end, it's all about the economic battle and how they leverage resources and who has more energy, who has more chips. And we know Trump is ramping up all the sanctions against China and limiting the exports, again, to give the US an edge in this asymmetric fight.
I think the focus on energy is the more meaningful thing, and I mean that's what you hear, right? If you listen to something like the All In podcast, which Ryan got me into, just to listen to how the billionaires, talk about this stuff. Whether you like them or not, it is fascinating to listen to how people who control billions and billions and billions of dollars in the U.S. and are tied in with the current administration, how they think about what we're doing and what's important. And their obsession is power generation, right? Like if there is some idea that AI is going to turn into $1 trillion GDP making industry, and that's the thing that's going to save us from some kind of economic collapse and whatever the fuck, then all of that is predicated on the ability to power these things, right? And in that, like, there's plenty of Chinese power projection coming in with like thorium reactors and like all these different ways that they've been monopolizing resources that we're just kind of not fighting pound for pound. I think there's an important discussion when we talk about this, which it's actually fairly multifaceted and interesting, right? For one, thinking about this Israel-Iran conflict and how meaningful it is that we've seen what Israel can do in a real war. I've been thinking a lot about like what we have seen China do. And the truth is that like much like the Chinese military, which we have not seen actually battle tested and used in a real war, you have not seen Chinese cyber operations in the context of war and what it actually means, right? Like we think of the Chinese as formidable because they have scale, because they're willing to spy in insane like proliferation and levels. But we have never, as far as I know, and if anyone has an example, please tell me, please call me out because I'm really interested. I don't know if we've ever seen a Chinese like proper disruptive attack or destructive attack, anything on critical infrastructure. And like, please, like, spare me the DDoS, right? Like, I'm saying like they actually hit an ICS system of some sort. They actually took down some meaningful infrastructure, internet connections, train systems, whatever the fuck you will. And it's like we've said in this podcast before, it's not like they don't have the requisite technical capability. But what does their actual cyber warfare doctrine, capacity, willingness actually look like? And that's what's going to make all of this meaningful beyond just the kind of alarmism, right, that you might describe around this. Because Ryan, to your point about this article being alarmist or whatever, it only is in a world where we're not actually concerned about all-out war with China. If you're willing to dismiss that as a scenario that is just not going to happen, or that the Taiwanese don't have to worry about, or even, God forbid, we had actually gotten into some kind of proxy confrontation in Iran with the Chinese, right? Like at that point, this all matters a lot. If that's not going to happen, if we are never going to see the Chinese actually embark on an all-out war with somebody we care about, then this doesn't matter at all. And at that point, we're just stockpiling cyber throughput the same way that, quote unquote, the same way that we've been stockpiling nukes, right? Like it's this forever cost You can never de-escalate it because God forbid you're seen as weak, having a nuclear gap, but you're just paying to maintain these expensive, horrific things that you hope never to use just for the sake of saying that you have them. And I don't know that we need to have the same thing on the exploit side of the house, right? Like
I
I don't know that those are equivalent.
I get a feeling in the people writing these reports and in your circles, your Washington D.C. circles, you view that conflict as an inevitability.
I think that, well, I'm not a good
Because
representative
when I
for,
read it, if you're telling me to read these reports with that lens, put that
yeah.
lens on. Are we going to have a physical a conflict with China? Are we not going to have a conflict with China? If I'm to read it within that lens, it feels
Yeah.
like you're arguing it's inevitable, and we should pay attention to this. And we're way behind, and we're getting our asses kicked. So
Well,
get moving now.
it's a different mentality. I think the idea here is that you don't prepare for a war when you get to a certainty of war. You prepare for a war well in advance, right? Like it's the reason that like we have 11 fucking aircraft carriers and people are complaining that the 11th one is in a late release, so we're only going to have 10. And then you look at other countries, you go, they have one if they're lucky. But the whole point of it is we want global power projection. You want to be able to park 2 aircraft carriers off of the side of the Middle East, and suddenly you are a player on the other side of the planet that everybody has to kowtow to. Uh, that kind of power projection is not earned in minutes and days. You make that shit up over years of planning and production and redundancy plans and whatever. And like, I mean, the US is an unbelievable war machine, right? Like, and people can bitch about us and they can say that we're in a debt spiral, and we can, talk about all the ways the US may or may not decay. But at the end of the day, I don't know who actually poses a sizable military risk to the United States as like pound for pound all out war on the military side. And the presumptive, contender is China, right? The largest military in the world and plenty of fucking resources and the ability for their own force projection and plenty of like places and people who are massively indebted to them. They do pose a sizable risk. So the question in DC is not, will this war happen? For most of the people who are involved in this sort of decision making, it's the calculus is, how would we fare in this war and how do we do better? There is no discussion as to whether the war will or will not happen, because that doesn't really matter, at least not from their perspective, right?
I asked the question because I want to just mention a margin research paper as well on documenting the growing role of cyber militias in China's network warfare force structure. And they're arguing that China has invested heavily on this. They've kind of reformed their cyber reserve focus and turning them into a malicious system that's directly connected to the PLA. Have you gotten a chance to read this report? And are we like flagging the same types of warnings that you're mentioning here?
I mean, I think that that's even more relevant in a way, right? I mean, look, what we're discussing here, both in Winona's paper, in the indictment of these MSS guys, and in this margin paper, is really our completely different appetites and ways of going about cyber operations, because a lot of these things are unthinkable or anathema in the US, right? Like what we were describing, right? The idea that the US is casually okaying people to break the law to do cyber operations on behalf of US government interests who are not US government employees or military folks, right? Anathema, unthinkable. The idea of sourcing exploits that are not being produced either in-house or produced from somebody right across the street who you are extremely comfortable with, but instead buying it off of some third party, whatever, and like a pipeline down the road, or from a fucking competition where people are going to know where it came from. Unthinkable in the US. And then the notion, much to Mauro Vignati's admonitions about, people getting involved in cyber conflict maybe being fair game. The idea in the US that you're gonna go take a bunch of San Francisco, like Silicon Valley engineers and be like, hi, you have been deputized as a cyber force member. Here's your pin. Please go hack, the Chinese. Unfucking thinkable. But
there's a component of it happening here where someone from Microsoft might be seconded to state to help with something, and at some point
but seconded you can talk about people getting seconded into defensive stuff and into the IC or whatever, but they're not being seconded into a military force projection unit. You're not being brought in, welcome to the cyber attack, as far as I know. You're not being brought in for the welcome to the cyber attack force, like this is what the Natanz PLCs look like. Now please, figure out a way to blow that shit up. Like, not without essentially becoming a part of some of this force, right? Like, I don't get to just moonlight on the weekends as part of the US's cyber offensive capabilities. And there's a meaningful thing here, right? The militia bit, I don't know, what does their preparation look like? What does it look like to actually involve people who you have not been training and actively involving in how you do your ops into what you do? I mean, all those are important questions about sort of the scalability of this force. But to your point about, well, some Microsoft person can be seconded. No, I mean, it doesn't really work that way. But the fact that it does overtly work that way in China actually says a lot, right? Like, the article goes, well, like, what happens when somebody, let's say you work at fucking Huawei, you have the largest fucking cell phone deployment and 5G deployment on Earth as part of your day-to-day work. Do you bring those capabilities to bear? I mean, you're one of like the beloved industrial giants that the Chinese government has essentially propped up and enabled to function at greater benefit than any other company because you're favored by the state. Okay, when the Chinese government needs you to turn Kenya's brand new 5G infrastructure that you built for them and that the Chinese government financed against people in Kenya, do you go, well, that's part of my day job. That's not what I'm doing here, guys. I'm just here to click some buttons, right? I think for once, all the shit that's been leveraged against the US, but we have not witnessed, is very relevant in being discussed with like Chinese companies.
One of the things in this margin research paper that stand out is their name Anti-Labs and Chihu 360 as among these cyber militia units. Do you view those guys, Costin, when those guys pop up, do you view them as Chinese cybersecurity AV/companies, or do you view them as...
But by the way, before we continue, can we say who is margin research? Like, perhaps you guys know. Who are these? Good question. Who is they don't have like an about page. There's like no people. There's no names on these papers.
Well,
what are we talking about?
I'll speak up right away. And like they're friends. They're people. Actually, you have met some of the folks that work there. I just think their website is particularly sparse. But our friend
is it sparse
Ian Roos,
on purpose?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's not like they hide who's like putting out some of the research, right?
But there's no names. Like almost like they're afraid to say.
No, the names are on the blogs. So
there's no name on this blog.
No,
on this one, nothing.
But go to the blog, click on the blog part, and you'll see the names of all the writers. I just think it's bad, UI UX. But just to put a finer point on it, this was actually our beloved late friend Sophia d'Antoine's company. Sophia was like an absolute brilliant exploit dev, vulnerability researcher, way precocious, unbelievably capable for her age. And she passed recently. And Claudia, her sister, has taken over the company. But we've got good friends there, like Ian Roos. I know Martin Wendigenson was working with them at some point as well. I think he might still be. I'm not sure. And they've been putting out great research stuff for a while now. I think Winona's actually really
I just want to say for the record that I hate the term of cyber militias. I think it's a terrible term. Like, you can call them whatever you want, but I think that trying to put everything under this umbrella and depicting them as cyber militia has no connection to reality.
Why,
So
when
maybe
you
I'll
hear
be the
militia,
one.
when you hear militia, why is that word?
It's a terrible construct to call them cyber militias. I think it's a terrible misunderstanding of how things actually work and operate. In China, probably it's used because it gives certain leverage. When you suddenly stop talking about people in the academia or private contractors or I don't know, students working and doing cyber espionage work. When you say that it's a cyber militia, you have like a totally different approach. You can put them into a different framework. You can like ramp up sanctions. I don't know, try to punish them, name and shame, and so on. So, in my opinion, I think from a pure technical point of view, it's a mistake to call them cyber militias. Of course, we can agree to disagree if you want, and I'm happy to discuss it with the others as well. But to me, I don't know, like it kind of tries to say there is something there which is more organized and at a deeper level than what actually happens. And I don't know if it's like to get budgets or to scare people or like scaremongering or for whatever purpose. And I hope they forgive me for saying those things. But if I am mistaken, I would like to see more evidence and more specific cases, not like just the big lines and the big picture. I think it would be more interesting to see specific cases of how this works and why they think we're talking about a cyber militia and not just like whatever happens pretty much all over the world at the moment. I think that this phenomenon is not specific to China, and I think also it's a mistake to say that it's unthinkable that things like this can happen outside China. Of course, I think they can happen and they do happen. But this phenomenon is much bigger, and they're definitely not cyber militias. There's a different term here that works best, I think.
I'm curious if, I mean, so just to kind of defend the perspective of the paper, I'm curious to what extent this is just really overt, right? Like I think even if I wonder if the term militias is a term the Chinese are putting on this, because we're not talking about it being like the researchers claiming that this could or may happen, but rather that there are like registries and like reforms to the cyber reserve law that say that the Chinese are overtly doing this and saying, hey, these are our militias and these companies are involved in this and that way. Like in that sense, you're the China. This isn't the researchers kind of going way out of their way. Like they're basically saying, hey, the Chinese are overtly saying that this is happening, that this university and that company are involved in cyber militia unit, blah, blah, blah. And like I mean, maybe there's nothing to it. Maybe there's no real process. Maybe there's no way that like we can actually see the reality of it all. And that they would, if the time came, there actually is no way to like actually operationalize these folks. But I think it says something that the government and the military are overtly saying this, and that companies and universities are overtly saying that they're a part of this, right? Like to the point of whether this can happen in the US or in Europe, I have no doubt that the US and Europe have a lot of like legit hackers who would be more than down to play ball in a real war. But I don't know how many countries have an overt process saying, hey, on day one of the war, report to here. This is your uniform. You are now a part of the militia militias train. Like people have like you go, if you're part of the reserve forces, like you go one weekend out of every so often to like train up, right? Like so.
And exactly, this is straight to my point, which I was saying. Let's see those orders, like, and let's see the specifics. Like these people from this university, whatever, they're being drawn in militia number 11751, right. And this is how they get trained and so on. Because I think it's mostly like conjectures and kind of speculation about how things work. Which again, I may be wrong here. I'm just asking for more facts as
Hey,
opposed to
like I
more
mentioned,
speculation.
the paper mentions Anti and Chihu 360 as the vanguard of this kind of mobilization of this militia. And there's no doubt that there's a blurring of the lines between the state and private sector capabilities here in China. Everywhere else, there's a lot of, exactly. So I don't know.
I mean, look, I can't pretend to have read this so deeply as to have verified it, but there's an Excel spreadsheet with links and documents back to like where the original foundings of the militias are related to what university and what company and what the statement is for this, that, and the other thing. Like it's not entirely. I
We'll
haven't
get
gone
margin
down that
research on the
rabbit
next
hole.
episode.
Let's do
Yeah,
that, sure.
yeah. I'll ask Ian or somebody,
We'll
know,
get
who
Ian and
wants to speak
Winona
to
and
it.
come and do a Chinese
I
ecosystem
mean,
episode.
throw Dakota in there, and we can just sit it out and eat popcorn
We
and
can
let
sit
them
out
talk
for
the whole
exactly.
time.
Exactly.
And by the way, it would be super interesting to know if, again, militias is how they call them. Because to me, it sounds like shooting yourself in the foot
Yeah,
if you call them militias.
I think they say cyber reserve groups, but again, I don't know. I'm just reading into it. I don't speak Chinese, right? Let Dakota sort of speak to that.
We're almost an hour in, and I want to shift to it. And the other big story that's been circulating for the past couple of weeks, but just today again, we got some more news around the arrests of these com assholes. I use that word because it was one of my most famous three-body problem rant was Juanito describing these guys when someone was selling action figures. But 4 people have been arrested in the UK as part of this investigation into the ransomware not epidemic, but the ransomware wave that happened in the UK. Co-op, Harrods, and these guys. The standout thing here is 2 males, aged 19, another one 17, and a 20-year-old female apprehended. We've known for a while that theCom is filled with these kids. What do you make of these arrests? Is this like a significant thing that puts a crimp in it, or is this just a little nip of the tip of the iceberg around what these guys are capable of and what they've been doing?
So I think it's really important that we're seeing arrests. I do want to put like a slightly finer point on whether, so like I insisted that we use the term the com because feeding into the whole scattered spider thingamabob is like, it's just inaccurate in a way that's like the marketing genuinely is getting in the way of us describing this accurately, right? Like we're saying the com, in Allison Nixon terms, because what we're saying is that there's this community of a bunch of groups and like Discord chats, Telegram chats, and a bunch of these younger folks who are unscrupulous and willing to trade in a lot of like sextortion
The worst of the
and
worst
child
people.
sexual abuse material and and a lot of physical attacks, right? Like they do a lot of harassment of folks, which is actually why a lot of people do not want to talk about these dudes, and understandably, right? It's a very like sort of toxic community in its way. So when you say this is scattered spider, that makes it look like it's one cohesive, unified threat actor, and it has like it's organized and they're all together, and that's just not an accurate representation of what this is. So even the com makes it all sound a lot more unified than it is. We just don't want to go around having to say like, well, this is the 764 whatever in this group and that chat in this Telegram group, and 6 of those kids do this together and 12 of those do the other thing, and they actually don't like each other, right? Like it's just really complicated in an unnecessary way. But I just don't want to get too far, right? Like we haven't heard anything about the official affiliation of these, these folks that are involved in this. So we've been throwing the term the com around. Remember that these attacks, like the ransomware attacks on Harrods, on the co-op, on Marks and Spencer, that just happened a few months ago, we were talking about it under the terms of like this Dragon Force RAS. This ransomware sort of platform, essentially that is Dragon Force. Jim Walter did a pretty good post on that at the time, and we got rumors that this was scattered spider related, and now we're having it discussed in scattered spider terms. But this is the most we've gotten out of who was actually behind this. It's like these 4 individuals in the UK. I mean, uh, it doesn't take a lot to think of them as being part of these groups. It also doesn't sound like they're geniuses to go on a ransomware rampage on giant organizations in their country of residence. Like, it just, why? Right? Like, it seems pretty fucking silly to hack someone down the street and then stay in the same country. And I mean, it doesn't scream professionalism or like wisdom. Like, it doesn't scream age either, which it doesn't seem to, seems to conform with this idea that it's, for teenagers, right?
Yeah, the age fits into kind of the narrative of what we've been told in the past about the kinds of people related to this type of activity. The bigger question is, does 4 arrests in the UK slow this group down? Well, I don't even want to call them a group, but you know what I mean? Is this just not another little thing they'll get?
I don't think it's a little thing. I think it depends on what kind of time they get, right? Like, I think Allison Nixon has made some pretty good arguments about how important it is to figure out the follow through on how to handle these folks, right? Like, because in many ways, I mean, how do you handle them, right? You can't throw them in jail for life at 17. But if you throw them in jail, you're kind of helping to further radicalize them into crime groups, right? Like, you're essentially taking these, possibly, I mean, some of them have claimed to be autistic kids, antisocial, problem children, who join these groups and, have these conversations. And get involved in doing sort of illicit activities, but a lot of it is like very low level stuff. And then you throw them into prisons with a bunch of hardened criminals. They become, it's not like you're radicalizing them as much as you're giving them access to a great deal of other types of crime. And then it just becomes kind of this toxic asset that you don't know what to do with long term. So it is a really big problem. I mean, if you look at sort of the Kurtaj Arian uh, arrest, I want to say it was 2 years ago. Like, part of the issues in the UK were like they picked up this kid, and the defense was that, he has autism and he's kind of had issues and whatnot, and then they wouldn't hold him, and then they wouldn't, like, they had to rearrest him, and like it is really complex. And like, what do you do in law-abiding societies with some of these kids? But not putting any repercussions on it is just incentivizing more and more folks to get into the dregs of this space. And I think, I guess it's a really long-winded way of saying, yeah, you need to pick these people up and you need to figure out a way to actually, like, limit them and find some way to hopefully refold them into the fabric of society as people who clearly have some level of technical skills, some level of acumen, and just need to kind of hopefully be guided in the right direction. But you cannot make it so that this is so low level that it's unimportant and that there are no consequences, because they're doing outsized shit. And a lot of it is
It doesn't slow down, like, because we've seen these arrests. We've seen the Canadian guy every now and then a new calm arrest pops up and so on. It doesn't slow these guys down in any way.
I wouldn't say that. I think there are personalities involved in this, and it definitely curves some of the behaviors. It definitely curves some of it. I think it's not going to slow everything down, considering that, like, some of them are in Vietnam, and like, what do you do, right? But like, interestingly, in the previous round of arrests, or at least the ones that I remembered, they picked up some people in Brazil, which to me was like, whoa, like, you normally don't get Brazil cooperating in some of these things. I don't know, right? Like, I think that seeing arrests for really blown up, trumped up bullshit charges of people in the US who just used a password and username is the wrong way of attaching friction and attaching importance to cyber crime, quote unquote. I think going after people who are clearly doing financially motivated crime and sextortion and, child sexual abuse material, and threatening people along the way, and threatening researchers and threatening law enforcement and all that, that is about as good a cause to actually use our laws, as trumped up as they may be or as inexact as they may be, to add some friction to it. You should tell people, like, hey, yeah, you can choose that life, but shit's gonna suck if
And
you go that route.
it's not a stretch to imagine that professional hacking gangs are kind of circulating among them and trying to pass themselves off as these kids who are just like wild and doing crazy shit.
I mean,
Costin, how
do
does
you
this
even?
register to you?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Juan.
I was just gonna say, like, it's how much of this whole IAB, like initial access broker space, is being mediated by going to one of these comm kids and saying, "Oh, how much for an activation on T-Mobile? Like, how much for a SIM swap, SIM jack?" Like, a lot of cryptocurrency heists. The whole like, "Oh, we just went and stole so and so's like $500,000 in Bitcoin from their Coinbase account," is being mediated by, I went on a Telegram channel, paid some kid $500, $2,000 in Bitcoin, SIM swapped this person and moved on. Like, they are enablers for a great deal of greater stuff.
How does this
Sorry,
calm
Kostin.
stuff register to you, Costin?
Look, this is an interesting. I think it typically the vast majority of ransomware groups that you hear about nowadays, they're like Russian speaking. There's like they have some members, I don't know, in Russia, maybe Ukraine, Moldova, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, a few other countries. So this probably is the exception to that rule. And it's interesting to see how they make mistakes that Russian hackers were making maybe 10 years or 15 years ago. And these are kind of mistakes that these people are making now. So like the most, I think the biggest major mistake they're doing is what Russians were saying, like don't shit where you eat. Like basically don't target companies or entities at home. So we know like for decades Russian hackers put checks in the malware, so when it runs on a system with the Russian language keyboard, it just quits. And the same for pretty much countries in the region. So in a way they're making the mistakes that Russian hackers were making 15, 20 years ago before getting rounded up by the FSB and being told this is off limits. You feel free to target whoever, but don't do this at home.
Right.
And the other thing, which I think these guys, they have an advantage, being native English speakers. They can very easily call those companies and social engineer the hell out of them with the proper accent, like pretending to be technical support. I don't know, maybe they even have like the most educated, elegant London
They're pretty
accent.
skilled at it too.
Yeah. So that gives them, for sure, it gives them an advantage. Like you don't see the Russian hackers calling from Russia and saying, "Please click on this link and activate my program so I can fix your 2FA access." This is not gonna happen. So this probably gives them an advantage over other groups, which is why a lot of people are more worried about Octospider or Octotempest or Scatterspider more than other ransomware groups, being more agile and being able, to social engineer their victims more effectively. At the same time, stupid mistakes, like if you live in the UK, right? And you live there maybe more or less happily, you don't target British companies with ransomware. I mean, that's like probably
That's
the
why I
most
said
stupid
it's like
thing you
kids,
can do.
right? Like that's some like childish ass thinking, right? Even just from the perspective of like, it doesn't take a hardened criminal to know that you don't want to be in the jurisdiction of the people that you're fucking with, right? Like even in the shittiest country on earth, like you just, why would you? Especially having the US across the street. That you can actually, like, the US is the cash cow. It's why we're usually the ones complaining so much about cybercrime. Is like, well, you lose, what is it, like 3 billion just on like romance scams, and people would normally be like, who the fuck is getting money from romance scams? Like, well, the US has a lot of old people with money and not, and they're a vulnerable population. If you're willing to fuck with them and no one's going to arrest you, why not, right? And cybercrime is global. So to then turn around and fuck over some of the bigger like collective institutions in such a notorious way that it was like big fucking news over the weekend. Like, you didn't hit one or two, like you hit all of it. Like, it just screams inexperience. And I don't know. I mean, like, these kids kind of fuck themselves. I don't know how badly they fuck themselves. And I think that's part of the question is there enough repercussion? A, B, do we want there to be hardcore repercussions, or is there some smarter way to help these
Rehab.
folks? Yeah, I mean, like to essentially say, hey, look, man, like you could have an amazing set of jobs for the rest of your life working in tech, or you can spend the rest of your life in prison or like running away from the cops. Like, what do you want to be doing? But I don't know. I mean, hopefully the UK is a more humane, more sophisticated place than we would be in handling some of these arrests. I don't know.
Well, the other thing is like, what does the future hold for these people?
No.
I mean, there's probably two ways out of this. One, they'll keep doing the criminal thing, and they just get out and do more and go back to jail. And the other one, that people speculate is that eventually they get some kind of respectable job in intelligence. I don't know, working for GCHQ or the likes, if they even hire convicted criminals.
Psychopaths.
I don't know.
We're talking about
I don't know if it's psychopaths,
hiring
but it's
convicted
you have
psychopaths.
sad.
That we've been seeing that. We've had a lot of discussions lately about like, hey, there's some comm kid who works at big company X, like,
Yeah.
and right, like or Y or Z.
All right.
But
Touche.
no, but look, it's a big question. How much of a stigma do you want to put on that? I think we have had broader. So like, if we move away from the comm and just talking about hackers, right? We have seen periods where there's been a lot of stigma around hackers. The AV industry, the antivirus industry, was always surprisingly like open in how against it was. For example, like, Eugene would never hire like a virus writer. VXers were off the table. And we've had that with virus writers in the past. Then you've had that with convicted hackers, right? Like folks have been giving, people shit about like hiring convicted hackers. And then you have like the judgment and stigma that some people place on people who've worked on, in the IC and in the intelligence community, in the military side of some of these operations. And it's a fairly uneven standard, and in a lot of cases it's kind of ridiculous, right? Like, you want to stigmatize somebody for having like pirated movies 10 years ago. It's like, who the fuck cares? But most of the people in the reversing space cracked games at some point, or did broke licenses and whatnot, and I don't think that they're hardened criminals or like not conscientious human beings. But this is different, right? Like, and I think it's different in the sense that what we're talking about is A, serious crime, B, a lot of other super fucking awful crime that has nothing to do with tradition, what we would normally think about as cyber. But like, all this extortion stuff is awful. Like, it's genuinely awful. So, and like victim intimidation and like paying people to like go shoot up a rival comm person's house and like throw a brick through their window and like harass a victim at that does security at some company.
This is psychopathic behavior I'm talking about.
Yeah. So shit's no joke.
The use of drones in warfare has popped up on this podcast. We've had it in Ukraine first, in the Israel-Iran conflict. Now we have a new story about a cyber attack against a Russian firmware, Russian developers behind like custom firmware that they're using to convert consumer drones from military use. And it appears, at least from these developers, asking folks not to download this firmware anymore. It's been compromised. What do you make of this? Is this do you think this is a Ukrainian operation? Are we following this closely, Kostin?
There isn't much details, so we don't know exactly what the firmware, if the firmware was trojanized or if they planted vulnerabilities in it. But it does sound like it's part of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. So I guess a Ukrainian intelligence, hackers, the military could be behind it, but we don't know for sure who actually is behind it. To me, I think it's brilliant. It's a brilliant operation anyways. Even, let's say, if the firmware was trojanized, or even if the firmware was not trojanized, there'll be for sure like
an
suspicions.
Element of doubt has already been sown, right?
Yeah, it's like just imagine the drone fails. Why did it fail? Is it because firmware is compromised? Like, was it like some error? You never know. It's like reminds me of the centrifuges at Natanz, and like people didn't know for sure. Like, why are they failing? Why are they failing so much? We don't know. Is it a malware? Could it be a malware? Could it be like a software modification, or is it like a hardware issue? Perhaps one of the rotors is broken, or the radios, or the antennas, or the fiber optic. So it sounds like a very modern warfare style of a story for sure, and they do need this kind of firmware, right, in order to bypass all sorts of limitations in consumer drones. Like for instance, you can't
Yeah,
fly
in this
consumer
case, they're
drones
talking about
in
DJI drones
geofence.
specifically. Yeah.
DJI,
Yeah, they're
correct.
talking about these Chinese-made DJI drones specifically that ship off the shelf with limitations on where they can
Correct.
fly, geofenced here and there. The idea is there's custom firmware that jailbreaks it, basically, right?
So it can fly anywhere in like it becomes more resistant to GPS spoofing, things like that. Also, they say it enables the use of high capacity batteries to make it more suitable for military missions, which makes sense. Again, drones are a very important part of warfare nowadays. This is how Mika was putting it. It's like it's a very expensive bullet, and it's incredibly effective when you remove all these limitations in consumer models, which again they are probably quite suitable and easy to procure. You just buy them. China is building insane huge quantities of these drones so they can be purchased, and we know that Russia has been purchasing tons and tons of Chinese drones. And with the modified firmware, that's like very suitable for the operations they still run now daily, despite the announced ceasefire, which somehow it never materialized. And
that war has escalated in the last week, in the last couple of days, even.
And Ukraine running out of interceptor missiles. The situation, of course, it's a tough situation. It's a terrible what's happening in Ukraine, and the volume of drones that is hitting Ukraine every day is absolutely huge. It's insane.
Juanito, according to this story, the developers claim that around 200,000 drones have been updated with this firmware as of March. The software removed manufacturer imposed flight limits, improved resistance to GPS spoofing, enables the use of high-capacity batteries, all of which makes them more suitable for military missions, as Costin described. How do you, when you look at this operation, is this like just a natural thing that happens in wartime?
I mean, I don't know if it's a natural thing. Without knowing that they did more, I am tempted to claim that this is a ridiculous fucking blunder on the part of whomever hacked this. If you didn't Trojanize the firmware or somehow use the access to all of the flashing terminals to at least know where the Russian production facilities are, to at least gain further access to what those terminals, like, you use this for a defacement? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, this level of access to something so materially important and you burned it for a fucking defacement?
Then it might not have been an official operation then.
I mean, I would hope not. But look, it would be such a fucking waste that I'm hoping that we just don't know what else they did. I'm hoping that, that they already gave all the addresses of where these terminals are to the Ukrainians, and like they're going out there and planting booby traps all over them, so it doesn't fucking matter. And the defacement was just part of like the funny haha part of the operation. But like, if they didn't, that's just such a fucking waste.
Because the guys admitted that they breached the servers responsible for delivering the firmware, so you could have had access to do anything.
I mean,
or maybe they have.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know, right? You don't tell your enemies when they've actually like succeeded, right? Yeah, I don't know.
It's just crazy to me how drones and hacking and drones and compromises become such a crucial part of our cybersecurity world now. But, we used to worry about about drones flying over airports and causing mishaps, and like that was the biggest that was the big headline. That was the big drone related headline. Now it's like drones are,
it's the economics of it. At the end of the day, what actually makes any of this relevant is the unexpected economic change in the price of autonomous vehicles, right? Like and look, I'm the first person who would have looked at a talk about like hacking autonomous weapons or whatever 5 or 8 years ago and been like, stunt hacking bullshit and moved on, right? But that's because the idea of like, well, where are these autonomous weapons? Like you're hacking, you're giving us sci-fi hacks of the sort of maybe future, and I'm
Right.
not a big fan of that. The
That's how I
minute
feel about like Rob Gilduta today, playing around with these like little robot thingies and getting them to
Rob
fight each other
Gilduta
and so
is
on.
a
Like these
fucking
guys are ahead of their
genius,
time.
okay?
Yeah.
Rob Gilduta is a fucking genius, and like we do well to pay attention to anything that he thinks is important. Uh, but I look at the concerns of Rob Gilduta, right? That paper that they published not too long ago about like Chinese autonomous robot
Hmm.
manufacturing and the gap that we have with the US. What are these people scared of? What are their people concerned about? They're not concerned about hacks. They're not concerned about the cybering of these things. They're concerned about our lack of manufacturing capability for like taking advantage of this mass sudden upswing in autonomous capabilities. And frankly, we should be concerned about that too, because from any perspective that tries to take advantage of, the advancements of the near future, it's, well, AI is around and everyone's thrilled about AI, and we don't quite know what AI is going to do. We just know that it's important. But one of the most important things that true AI advancements enable is autonomous robots. And autonomous robots can actually significantly disrupt the global supply stasis and shittiness that we find ourselves in, right? Where you go, well, the US doesn't have enough trained labor, it doesn't have enough, just young folks that are ready to work at factories. It doesn't have enough of a training pipeline. So you go, well, surely we can change that with robots. And you go, sure, but we can make about three. You can make three robots in a year and a half. And you go, what the fuck are we doing with that? Right. Like, and the Chinese, on the other hand, can make like they have all the people, they have the know-how, they have the facilities, and they know how to make the fucking robots. So what happened? Like, what kind of manufacturing hockey stick are we talking about China going on?
Hmm.
And a lot of, to the Peter Sahans of the world, um, there's a lot of people who have been comforting themselves about China's economic superiority with the idea that they're going to face a population collapse, that they're going to have this demographic problem. Because, I mean, who the fuck wants to emigrate to China? And then who the fuck is working the fields in China when all of their young people move to the cities? And then you get the usual first world problem where you just, people stop having as many children, right? It turns out that the more developed a nation gets, the less people want to have any fucking snot-nosed kids. And that's understandable. But then who is going to work and who is going to build things? And you go, well,
You're
in
listening to
China,
the
the
All In
robots
podcast too
will.
much with this population shit.
Oh no, they all have children. But look, the point here is like this is a serious concern. That is a serious concern, and there's and they're advancements that go hand in hand with each other, right? Like I've been fascinated with biped robots since I was probably 10 years old, but the limitations at the time were what? Even if you can build a thing, even if it can move, how are you going to program a deterministic system that allows this thing to function in a useful way? And the answer was, well, with a lot of time and patience, and it's not going to be that useful. The minute world models come into the picture, the minute you have this NVIDIA inference engine of like world producing, like what do they call them? Digital twins of like manufacturing plants. And like what they're doing is coming up with the ability to use deep learning to create these the essentially self-adapting systems that can function inside of a factory or in a kitchen or in whatever, because they don't need to be told explicitly how to do every single thing. They can infer how to, like get a cup of water, like, oh, open the thing, grab the glass, don't crush the glass, put the glass down, pour, grab the water pitcher, put the water in the thing, put things away, give people the glass, right? Like, if you have to program every single one of those fucking functions deterministically, then it's not useful. the minute you had these real breakthroughs in LLMs, that's why robotics suddenly became a thing. And that's also why, like, I think people are getting confused and thinking that we as a society are more ready to embrace futuristic technologies, which is why everybody's talking about quantum. And you go, no. The AI thing is enabling autonomy, and therefore robots suddenly look more interesting. Quantum is still a fucking pipe dream way down the line. Sure, someone can get into that speculative space, but there's nothing about the new breakthroughs in this that suddenly mean that quantum is like just over the horizon. Sorry, that was like 4 rants stacked back to back.
By the way, on the topic of drones, are we still allowed to do some I don't know, conspiracy theories?
Because there's conspiracy
like
Costin, give me.
There's a very interesting development in the story with the drones, with the New Jersey drones. If you remember it, we've been talking about it in the past. And I remember that back in the days there was a senator. Do you remember the U.S. senator who claimed that these are Chinese drones who come off some kind of
yes, a submarine in the middle of the ocean,
carrier in the ocean? Do you remember that story?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the latest development in my conspiracy circles is that they are indeed Chinese drones. So what's happening here is that the U.S. had this ability to develop anti-gravity vehicles for some time. Like we talked about TR-3B Astra and other magics.
Oh my God.
We talked about that in the past.
Full-on conspiracy.
The idea is that the U.S. were using these technologies for some time to spy on China, and the Chinese obviously were not happy. They caught up. They developed their own anti-gravity solutions, and they did like a show of force, flying them over U.S. to demonstrate they have the same capability and to tell the U.S. to back off from using the TR-3B.
How is that a conspiracy when there was a fucking balloon traveling across the country? Like there was a literal balloon in the sky that was visible to people's eyes, flying across the country, that was documented and linked to China. And I'm like, why is any of this drone shit a conspiracy?
Absolutely.
Because you're not talking about TR-3B platform, like giant flying Doritos in the sky that
and
people
the
have
TR-3C, which was just released. And
I just can't keep up with this conspiracy gap, right? Like the technology there is just some, you know.
Before we run out of time, I want to get to two other stories. Costin, your old great team published a report on a Batavia new spy.
He never worked there.
Yeah.
He didn't work there. I never worked there. Like.
Costin, the team that you ran. There's a new report out on a Batavia new spyware that emerged earlier this year targeting organizations.
Challenge you there, Ryan. How do you know it's my team and it's not one of the other teams? Huh.
It says great, no?
No, it says Kaspersky expert.
So it could be like AMR.
Costin, tell me what all of these things mean. So when someone puts Kaspersky expert, what does it mean?
I cannot. You know me. I can only speak in theory. So, assuming
from
that
your
I
imagination,
have a company, I have my company, and sometimes we publish stuff, right? When it's soft, basically soft stuff that
when
doesn't
someone
get
might
anyone
call you a
killed.
militia. You might just
stuff like that. Then we put our names, like it's a blog written by Costin. It's a blog written by this guy, by Juan. Juan didn't seem to care. I think he put his name.
I put my name on everything.
Every single time he had like no fear, like balls the size of watermelons. So whenever that happens in the blogs, like. If it's a soft blog, you see the name. If it's something dangerous, like the heavy hitting, what was it? I don't want to give any names. Then you suddenly don't see that. You see like a company
great
name
team.
or like an well, sometimes you see great, but like that means that the whole team, the whole global research team is suddenly
That's
a
validated
target.
It. You put the
so then you
great
expand it
checkbox,
further, right? Like you expand that further, and you say like a company expert or like a Sentinel-1 or Intel or like whatever you want.
Yeah.
And that kind of it dissipates the fire. So
Okay.
what we see here is
Let me rephrase it then. We
it's
have
an
a
expert.
Kaspersky expert documenting Batavia, a new
That can
spyware.
be two people, basically. Well,
No,
I don't want to.
the interesting thing here, and we've talked about this in the past, is Kaspersky has been very focused on reporting on APTs hitting Russian organizations, and this is another one of those. Is there a suspicion here that this is Russian? How do you rate the quality of the report? Did we get samples, IOCs? Help me understand.
It's very, very similar to most other similar reports that they pushed recently, in the sense of it seems to target Russia either exclusively or to kind of focus on Russia. There are no samples on VirusTotal from the IOCs from the blog. By the way, since we started the podcast, I was able to locate one sample while you guys were discussing this asymmetric
Everything,
warfare.
everything
You saw me.
EXT,
You
everything
saw me doing
DLL,
here. Yeah,
everything,
I
everything.
found it. I found one sample that's horribly obfuscated, like a JavaScript Visual Basic script obfuscation. So this kind of reminds a bit of Cloud Atlas. I don't know if it's the same actor, which could kind of point in the direction of Ukraine. That would make sense in the context. Now, who wrote the blog? I guess this is either someone from one of the other research divisions, not necessarily the global research and analysis team. It could be one of the others, especially those who are typically doing incident response, and they saw some of these attacks more often. But yeah, I put all the hashes in for monitoring for in my project is now on VT. So if something shows up on VT in addition to that sample that I was able to find, I'll let everyone know. But by the way, probably I'll publish this hash of the sample that I found, which is not in the blog, by the way.
I think it's interesting, right? Like, it's obviously not a sophisticated campaign by any stretch of the imagination, right? Like Visual Basic to Delphi samples. It kind of reminded me of, like, just in principle of like Obator, right? Like you get some, interesting spyware that just pops out of the blue. It's not necessarily very sophisticated, but in this case, it's notable in its, like, the exclusivity of its targeting. It's clearly spyware. And I think this is something that I wanted to in some way tie into the discussions around Winona's paper and, like, the discussions about, like, cyber capability generation and exploits and whatnot, which is like, we in the West think like sophistication is so deeply burrowed into how we think about cyber ops that we are surprisingly dismissive of how much you can get done from an intelligence perspective, from an access perspective, with very, very low quality, run of the mill tooling, right? Like, and I mean like run of the mill backdoors, things that are well known, right? Like, there's a reason why you still see Conficker infections to this day. Like, there's a reason why you see Turla hijacking other people's shitty botnets, because, like, there's so many machines that are not just already infected, but also readily infectable with really simple toolkits. And the thing, what we in the West take as an essential trait, which is covertness, is it's a fixation of ours that comes from the intelligence community, but it has become a financial drag as a requirement for our ops that don't apply to a lot of other places. If this is the Ukrainians and they took some absolute garbage toolkit that they're pushing around through, like, random, not even creative, not like super generic phishing, and that's getting them onto a bunch of machines, and from there they can assess, A, like, what's the value of the information that we got out of this box? B, should we escalate this access or provide this access to somebody else? Like, that is a very that is a successful, super high ROI, like return on investment operation, right? Your investment near zero, your exposure near zero, your potential gains infinite, right? Um, and that's something that I think the US has a really hard time embracing as an idea, mostly because of all of the ridiculous strictures that we built up around this. The idea of having like infections that are not direct targets, that are not important, like having footholds in systems that we may not actually need to have access to or good justification to be in, like blah, blah, blah. Um, it, and also needing to control the toolkit from beginning to end, right? Needing to know where the exploit came from, having re-weaponized it ourselves, having the infrastructure be managed by us in some perfect way, having the toolkit be something that we developed in-house. Like, I think some of the mentality around that is changing, but you have to admit that you are depriving yourself of a certain kind of cowboy mentality that does give you a lot and that allows for a lot that we just will not do.
Quick question and a thought that crossed my mind when we talk about Kaspersky only reporting on Ukrainian things hitting Russian organizations. Is that, do you think, a deliberate strategy, or do you believe that's just the level of their visibility today, following all the sanctions activity and all this stuff costing? Do you have a thought on whether they're just not seeing more stuff?
Well, I think there is for sure a financial focus for any kind of commercial company. You want to essentially care about your customers. If the vast majority of your customers are in Russia and they're getting hit with this kind of things from Ukraine,
and that's the reality, right? The reality is the bulk of the revenue comes from.
Correct. And but it may not be just Ukraine, maybe other countries like, I don't know, I saw that recently Azerbaijan is becoming extremely anti-Russian rhetoric, like, you know, they stopped teaching Russian in
conflict,
schools.
that Armenia conflict is always bubbling too, right?
It is correct. So it may not even be Ukraine, to be honest. Like I did notice that the malware, one of the malware is written in Delphi, which is a funny choice. I mean, yeah, sure, why not?
Brazilians doing this shit?
Any relevance to the name Batavia?
I can't say.
Okay.
But there was another thing which attracted my attention, which is like it's a kind of a pretty kind of brute, raw kind of a malware which tries to upload all the files from your system. So what is going to happen? Inevitably, it will try to upload the same files over and over, flooding the CNC. So to avoid this phenomenon, they actually hash the first 40,000 bytes of each file. And to me, when I see things like this, it's like almost
signature.
It makes me nauseous. Like who hashes 40,000 bytes? It's unthinkable. This is what is it? It's a tragedy. You hash, I don't know, 32,768, 65,536.
So what did you write the signature already, or are we waiting?
40,000 bytes. I mean, it's a tragedy. It's an affront to the gods, to the hex gods, and they hash it with the FNV1832 hash, which reminded me, by the way, of the SolarWinds case. When the malware used in the SolarWinds, they were using the FNV hash extensively, which was also the case, by the way, with the Casio. Casio was also using the FNV hash.
Yeah, but that was all in .NET, right?
Correct. But again, this choice, me personally, I would never use FNV. I would use other things. So I thought that was a weird choice of FNV hash, 40,000 bytes, and Delphi into one package with VBS.
Did you write the signature yet, or are we waiting here?
I don't have the binary. I have a Visual Basic script that anyone actually can find on VirusTotal by looking for root-exchange.com and communicating files. But I don't have the Delphi binary yet. So
I think just the C2 name, that Oblast Ru, to me is like meh. Okay. Yeah, this is I don't
It's
know.
a bit too obvious, right? Or rule exchange.
I mean, look, you know who you're going at. Again, who you're going after. You're putting the right amount of effort. I'm also really curious. I was like just glancing through the discussion of the VB script, but I haven't looked at it carefully. Does it say that Windows 11 is required? Like, who the
To
fuck
run
runs
it?
Windows 11 in Russia? Like, do people have Windows 11? Like, I think it almost tells you a little more about what they're looking for, but I
That's a
wasn't
good
sure if that was
question.
like a hard requirement or if it was just part of like the UIC bypass for the Visual Basic script and maybe not actually a limiter selector.
Looks like, yeah, it says Windows 11 OS version required for further execution.
Yeah, I'm telling you, like, this is a fucking weird. It's a weird one,
It's a
but
weird
it
one.
makes me wonder, like, who, like,
The second time
what
we're
falls
describing a
under that
weird
category?
report out of Kaspersky with like missing information, quality issues. I don't know.
Not great. Not
Not
great.
great.
Not great.
Can we do
someone,
a very
Make
Someone,
great again.
shared the Yara rule with me, and this is the only thing I'm gonna say. It's not necessarily good, it's not bad, but like just by comparison, someone shared the Yara rule with me as an example of how things are done nowadays.
Oof.
And it was a Yara rule for something. It was something along the lines, basically, if MD5 of 0 and file size equals this value, and MD5, which is, yeah, how the mighty have fallen.
Not great. Not great.
This is not great.
Not great.
Speaking of not great, chainalysis.
Ooh, under the belt.
No, I saw the headline that a portion of the Bybit funds, this billions of dollars that were stolen, were frozen by Greece with some help from Chainalysis, and I clicked on this report, seeing oh, this could be a big giant development here. What did we find in this report, Costin?
I like how you put me in the spotlight. Yeah, because I am here to offend everyone, right? Including Juan's friend. Sorry about that.
Please.
Yeah, like, look, this sounded like a fantastic report. I was like, whoa, let's click and let's read all the details. Like, you know what I love in life. There's people like I don't know, who like smoking. Other people like drinking. I like hash. Like hashes in particular, not that kind of hash, but more
not that
like
kind of hash.
not the hash, but not the hash brown, but the MD5 hash or the SHA-1 hash. Those are the kind of hashes, and or wallet addresses. And sadly, like, there's nothing in the blog, only kind of bragging about the fact that with our amazing technology, this is what the Greek government was able to achieve.
Not only with our amazing technology, like with the foresight to buy our shit early, and you're like, oh my god, what? And we thank our middleman company that, like, what fucking sales bro wrote this shit? Like, is it going on LinkedIn? Like, what the fuck is this?
The landmark success was made possible by authorities' strategic interest in Chainalysis reactor in 2023, procured and secured by a local partner. It's like, what the hell are we?
What's going on? Yeah.
What's going on at Chainalysis? Because
it's an internal marketing email that leaked for the rest of us.
This is what it looks like. It looks like an AI accidentally posted an email as a blog.
Yeah, exactly. Sales win.
Let's leave it right.
Sales win, right?
But like, let's be constructive. How would you write this blog? Or like, how would I write this blog? If it was me, I would write it in the sense to be more, how to say, tech friendly. I would give a bit, let's say, more details about what happened with the Bybit hack.
Yeah.
What kind of funds were moved, who did it, things like that, and then like give context. The money were being transferred as Tether or whatever into this exchange in Greece or however. And yeah, we were able to track it across different blockchains because we are able to correlate things. I mean, you don't do yourself a favor when you publish a blog about a great thing. Again,
Yeah.
this is a fantastic thing that they were able to.
You think they were
seize
able
the
to pull it off? Like, we can't even trust that this actually happened because
Or
there is
it
just
can be
nothing.
like $500, right? It can be
Yeah, exactly. A portion of the Bybit funds
$5,000,
could be,
which was like, out of 1 billion, it's $500 were seized in Greece. Things like this, in my opinion, they matter, and they can kind of show respect for your audience. If your audience are technical people who really care about details and about the importance of this information in the blogs, then you owe them. They
Yeah.
deserve to get a bit more details. And
This is a
again, there's
painful
about
segment because Chainalysis has been pretty
Yeah.
solid in the past.
absolutely, and they for sure they have amazing technology, and they have amazing people as well.
I think so. Look, let's. You said how do we to be constructive?
How do we
like,
fix it?
How do we fix it? Look, the real issue to me, this reads like you have a shitty CMO or like whoever it is that runs your marketing doesn't have an appreciation for who your audience actually is, and you let a sales bro come out and say, oh. We need to claim some credit for this thing that's in the news. So we need to let people know that our technology was used. And the real problem with the fucking blog is that it doesn't tell you what about
Happened.
Chainalysis technology means that what it provides made it possible, able, successful, enabled the customer to do this really great thing that you're claiming you're doing. So it's very it's somehow it's how do I put it? Like it's amateurish because even as a sales pitch, it doesn't tell anybody else what it is about your tech that makes it worthwhile to go pre-spend and pre-train and pre-enable people to use it to do what exactly? To stop a heist that didn't happen in your country with funds that maybe came your way based on what? Right? Like it's just fucking dumb. And they have great people like Jackie and like they do good work. So to me, this is just a company that like maybe needs a little bit more advice at its executive level of saying, you know, what makes for effective showcases of what we do as opposed to just alienating. Like, look, the three of us have never said a bad word about Chainalysis before this blog post. So what
Yeah.
you have earned yourself is negative reputation by doing something fucking dumb.
Stupid, I agree.
Sad.
All right. Costin, close the show with some shout outs, please.
You know me, I'm not the best expert on shoutouts because all my friends work in the shadows. But to those
Shadow
guys
shoutouts.
who got their laptops kind of to stay in China, and those who found people in their rooms fiddling with the lights and the fuses and the internet, shoutouts, you know who you are. I'm meeting some of them next week, by the way, here in Bucharest to catch up over a tea. We are all on diets, unfortunately. We are at the age when we used to meet for burgers and shawarma, including the very famous 1 kilogram shawarma of Bucharest.
Oh my God.
I'm afraid that's off the table nowadays, but we do tea. So shout outs to those guys.
The guys that
Juanito?
do tea. Well, first off, shout out to the SummerCon organizers. This is always, I mean, it's one of the longest
Are
running.
you speaking?
No, for once I have I have made the wise decision not to speak. I've spoken to SummerCon like maybe 4 times. Notably, I have blacked out on the stage at SummerCon in the past. They've been
It's true.
incredibly gracious about this. So
They invited you
I
back.
owe them for life, right? Like the SummerCon people can write me like 2 days before the conference and tell me to like give a talk, and I can't say no. So I'm I'm always very happy about this. But it also just credit to the community that they have. Like the New York hacker scene is very different and unique than a lot of the other conference spaces that you go to. So it's always a really nice time. We mentioned Sophia, like that was Sophia's old stomping grounds, and I think there's a very much like a warm sentiment of the folks there who still love and miss her.
They still announced the
shout-outs.
Pontoon nominations and stuff there, right?
They used to. I would expect that they still do. But yeah, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I go just for the
Shout out to
surprise of
everyone
it.
getting to New York City for SummerCon. It's freaking hot as hell. Good luck
Oh
with
my
all of that.
god. Yeah, well, DC is not any better. But shout out to our Predatory Sparrow friends, Adalat Ali friends who are still doing cool shit in Iran. I can barely keep up with what's going on, but for good material. And one last but definitely not least, my camera setup is finally slightly
It's better.
it's way better. Now comes the lighting, so Ryan can stop bitching me out about the lights. But the shout out to a good friend of the podcast and great friend of mine, Thomas Ridd, who has not only joined us here before, but was kind enough to show up with an amazing toolbox and like a lot of enthusiasm to drill into this $4,000 monitor and like make me a rosewood holder for my camera that can descend upon this ridiculous screen. Thomas is working on a book on. He's been very quietly working on a book on CTI and like history of cyber threat intel for a few years now, and the things that he's talking about now that he has found are mind blowing. So I'm genuinely super excited for this book. I don't know when it's going to come out. I try my best not to put any pressure on him, but this is one of the things that I'm genuinely deeply looking forward to. So shout out to our good friend Thomas.
Who's making woodworking for everyone except me. I told him I'm bringing a 2x4 to LabsCon. You can frame
the amount of
something out
equipment he
here.
showed up with here. I mean, I don't think he can get it to Arizona, bro. It's not. You got to come commission things here.
Shout out to the members of the LabsCon Call for Papers committee, program committee, who are currently voting. I noticed, Costin, you finished all your votes. First in line, champion over there, Mr. Goat over there.
But by the way, if I may say so, there are some interesting submissions this year. I don't know about the others, but I spotted a few interesting APT cases that I rated very high. There's also a lot of AI papers, a lot of talk about agents and leveraging AI for threat intelligence. So it should be super, super interesting.
So you think we'll get a fantastic agenda out of it?
I'm sure.
I love that Kostin knows because he's in the program committee. Ryan and I, who set the agenda, have no fucking clue because we haven't even looked. We haven't read anything, and to be fair, we have.
I let the program committee filter the ones I need to read.
Yeah, it's true. We have but also like I don't want to bias it, right? Like let's wait and you wait and see what the program committee actually says, and then we go in. So I look forward to being surprised.
Yeah, the voting closed at the end of this week, and I think we'll head down to getting an agenda put together. Speaking of conferences, my last shout out is to the folks at Countermeasure, who's putting together this cybersecurity conference in Ottawa from November 3 to 7. For the first time, the three buddies, including Kostin, will be together in person to do an in-person 45-minute episode of the podcast
45?
on stage there. Yeah, that's what I see they put in the agenda.
What is the beginning of an
what
episode?
Are we doing, just the intro?
The intros, yeah. That's not even like a rant.
But there's a bunch of training happening there, including training from Kostin, from Master Vitali, I saw is also on the agenda for training. And the guys have generously offered a discount code for anyone going to this Ring Zero trainings happening at Countermeasure 2025. The code is CM25, Countermeasure 25, CM25-3buddy with the number 3, BUDDY. If you're going to head out to Ottawa for Countermeasures, hop on there. Kostin, what are you training about? You're helping people find iPhone implants, I think?
Yeah. iOS, I wouldn't say it's forensics. It's more like iOS threat hunting, the kind of things that I do to find whoever is targeting my iPhone, looking for suspicious events, how to develop your own methodology, how to develop YARA rules, other tools like in Python to hunt for anomalies in iOS logs, in the network traffic. So it will be a training spanning across a couple of days. So we'll have plenty of time to look at all these topics in case that, of course, there are enough interested parties.
And this is iOS specific.
Absolutely, iOS.
Master Vitali Kamluk is doing malware analysis and reversing. So I'm super excited to be able to catch up with all these folks there. Look out for that.
Are you
And
giving
with
the
that,
code? Where are you going to put it?
I did. I'll put the code in the show notes as well. I just announced the code as well. What was
Can
the
you
code
spell
again?
it again?
CM25-3, buddy. CM25-3 BUDDY. Go get yourself a ticket and get yourself a discount. And with that, we'll catch you again next week. Good luck at SummerCon.
Thanks, man.
Peace out.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.